Welcome to our lunch. My name is Jennifer Dill, and I'm the director of TREC, the Transportation Research and Education Center here at Portland State University. I'm also a professor of urban studies and planning. So I'm going to say just a few words before we get on with our luncheon speakers. First of all, if you weren't here this morning, or if the coffee hadn't kicked in yet and you forgot, this event, the summit, is a major event of NITC, the National Institute for Transportation and Communities, which is our University Transportation Center here at Portland State, along with our 5 other university partners, University of Oregon, Oregon Tech, University of Utah, and our newest partners, University of Arizona and University of Texas at Arlington. So welcome. I also want to thank our communication partners on this year's summit. They include the Portland chapter of Young Professionals in Transportation, the Portland chapter of the Women's Transportation Seminar, the Oregon and Washington chapters of the American Planning Association, and the Oregon section of the Institute for Transportation Engineers. Thank you for your help in communicating our messages. I'd also like to thank CH2M for sponsoring the student poster competition. If you haven't visited the posters yet, you'll have an opportunity to after lunch, and then you can stay for our reception and see who is going to go home with some nice extra cash. And as a student, that's really important. So thank you, CH2M, for sponsoring that. I also want to thank PSU's Urban Sustainability Accelerator, part of the Institute for Sustainable Solutions, for some additional support for our program. So I hope you enjoyed the morning sessions. I want to thank all of the presenters for the expertise that you've been sharing with us today, and also tomorrow at the workshops for those of you who will be joining us there. I did hear from our front desk staff earlier that this is actually the largest summit that we have had in our 9 years, so thanks a lot for that. And of course, I really do need to thank the TREC staff for all of the work that goes into planning this event and making it the success that it is. That includes Lisa Patterson, Sophie Hawley, Lacey Friedley, John MacArthur, Hal Hagnorn, Ava Maria Mookie, Cheyenne Kalanoff, Hui Zhang, and our new communications director, Kate McCusker. She just started 2 weeks ago, and we just sort of plopped her in and said, hey, we have this huge event coming up, start publicizing it more. So thank you very much, all of you. I also should recognize Renata Frantum, who is here, who's now with the City of Portland, but had been working for TREC and did a lot of the work at the beginning of the planning for this event, which is a year of planning. So thank you all. So now I'm very pleased to introduce Portland State's new president, Dr. Rahmat Shoureshi. He's going to come up and say a few words, but first I'll tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Shoureshi became PSU's 9th president this summer, bringing with him nearly 4 decades of academic experience, a record expanding research opportunities, and a history of inspiring faculty collaboration. Sounds like a great match for what we do at TREC and NITC. Prior to PSU, Dr. Shoureshi served the New York Institute of Technology as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, and then Interim President. At the University of Denver, Dr. Shoureshi served as the Dean of the School of Engineering and Computer Science for 8 years. He held faculty positions at Wayne State University, Purdue University, and the Colorado School of Mines, where he was also an endowed chair professor of engineering and director of several research centers. The author of more than 250 technical publications and a mechanical engineer, Dr. Shoureshi earned his bachelor's degree from the MIT of Iran, Sharif University of Technology, and a master's degree and doctorate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. An expert in automation, control systems design, and artificial intelligence, Dr. Shoureshi holds 9 U.S. patents for biomedical and engineering systems, sensors, and devices. You can follow him on Twitter at @PSUPresident. So welcome, Dr. Shoureshi.
Thank you, Jennifer. I wasn't sure if Jennifer was talking about me or somebody else, but it was a great introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you and spend a few minutes. I want to start by saying how grateful I am for all of the work that every one of you is doing. You gathered from that introduction that I'm one of those that truly believes in research. And even as a provost, I still have graduate students doing research together. I'm not sure if I can continue as a president, we'll see. But the point I want to make is that I value greatly the effort of scholars like yourself. And I know how competitive is out there, and the effort that you have put to make TREC and the Institute successful is admirable, and so I want to thank you for your contributions. The other, of course, is that as a university, our goal is to educate the next generation. And the best way of doing that education is to combine the effort in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. And doing and getting students involved in research is a great way to really supplement their education. And also the fact that we have faculty from now 5 universities involved in TREC, and also in terms of institute, that's great, because the other part of me is I truly believe in partnership and collaborations. And I have done it through all of my academic life, and I hope to expand those at PSU, because I believe in that no one by itself can do it all. And truly, when you partner, that's when you see the benefit of having ideas coming from different perspectives and working together. Now, let me take a moment and say a few words about what you guys collectively have been able to do under this, both the Institute as well as the Center. I know that every university has also been able to come up with accomplishments like what PSU has done. I'm proud that through the effort of the center, the Portland metro area has benefited significantly, especially the award-winning transportation demand management program that came out of the effort of this center has been a great contributor to the Portland metro area. It is through that effort that now we see 70% less individual vehicles driven by one person. You can imagine that the impact that it has both on environment, traffic, all of those. So this is just one example of many of the contributions that you folks have provided. The other is that, of course, you look at how many have graduated from the center and now they are working in the important areas and positions that impact the future of not only Portland, but our country. I always think about the fact that back in 1985, I know many of you were not born even, it was the first time I went to China. And of course, it was a different China at that time. And when I was at the Tiananmen Square, and the traffic light would go from red to green, you saw this millions of bicycles coming. And it was great. Now, you fast forward today, Beijing is one of the polluted cities that you go to. And so it's almost like what we are trying to do to go back, they did the reverse. So hopefully someday they're going to reverse it again. What I'm saying is that research in the urban design, transportation has a major and profound impact on sustainability and the future of humanities. And that's what I value the most about what you folks are doing. So thank you for your contributions, and I look forward to seeing you all, maybe even more next year at the next summit. Good luck with the rest of the summit.
Thank you very much. So now we're very pleased to welcome our speaker today, Hannah Ubl. Hannah is a writer, market researcher, and generational expert with BridgeWorks, a company that has been dedicated to bridging the generational divide in the workplace and marketplace for over 16 years. Through their cutting-edge research and best-selling books, BridgeWorks has helped some of the country's best companies work through the inevitable clashes that can happen between traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation Xers, and millennials. From the ARP to MTV, they have been called on by business executives, politicians, and the media to share their expertise. Hannah is a millennial who grew up watching Full House, dancing to Backstreet Boys songs, and has a vast collection of participation awards, including a 6th place swim trophy. Next year, maybe we'll put that on our survey of attendees. So today, she is a renowned keynote speaker, and we're thrilled to have her with us. Please join me in welcoming Hannah Ubl.
Hello, everyone. In case anyone was wondering, by the way, there were only 6 people in the race, so I did not deserve that award. But also on behalf of all millennials, so I feel like anytime I say we got participation awards, usually millennials cringe. They're like, I didn't ask for any of those, so I'm on your side. All right, so while we're getting hooked up with the presentation, I just want to say that I'm really, really thrilled to be here and talking about generations and talking about transportation. I have to say, this is my 2nd time that I've been to Portland and to Oregon at large, and in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I'm from, I like to believe that we're really great at building wonderful transportation for the cities and having wonderful bike paths. But when I come here, my mind changes a little bit and gives me a bit of perspective. So it's just very cool to see everything that you are doing here. So I talked to a lot of people before I came here, and I was asking a lot of questions about what people love about their work, about what do they like to do. And I talked to people in a lot of different areas. So I talked to people who are engineers, I talked to people who are in planning, people have been doing it for 30 years, people have been doing it for a year, and I was hearing a lot of different things. But in general, there was this theme, okay? And the theme, you'll see in a second, oops, is this. Okay, so the theme was, I love that my work makes a difference for everyone in the community. This is just the general theme for every single person I talk to, which is really cool, because constantly you're thinking about all the generations and the communities in which you live. And now I'm going to turn inward a little bit and talk about the people and all the generations you work with. So I am curious, because sometimes it's like, oh cool, there's a talk about generations. How many of you are kind of sick and tired of hearing about this topic? Okay, cool. How many of you are kind of sick and tired of hearing about millennials? Okay, awesome. Curious, how many of you are millennials who just raised your hands? Okay, yeah, it's basically like all of you. That is really, really common. Millennials hate being called millennials. Pew Research Center actually just put out something recently, and it found that 73% of millennials hate the name millennial for their own generation. They're like, I'm not one of those people. We like to call them the I'm not a millennial. They're like, I have no qualities of anything the media says about me. But the reason people are kind of feeling this millennial fatigue is because of stereotyping, right? Like, we've all seen all the headlines and all the articles out there, but we may think some stereotypes ourselves from time to time. So I'm curious, when you just hear the word millennial, what words or phrases pop into your mind? technologic dependence. Yes, what else? Oh, avocado toast. Yes, avocado toast. I also saw an article this morning that I feel like kind of rivals avocado toast. It said, millennials are growing houseplants and treating them like children because they can't afford kids. It's like, that's a bit of a stretch, okay? What else? What other words have you heard, or phrases? Tiny house, yes. What else?
Don't want a driver's license.
Don't want a driver's license, yeah, no one drives ever. What else?
You killed a lot of things.
You killed a lot of things. Oh yeah, it's like blame it on millennials, right? Yeah, we're killing every single industry that's out there. We're sorry. Okay, what else?
You're gonna solve all the problems of the previous generation.
Right, we're gonna solve all the problems of the previous generations because the previous generations just created problems. They didn't do anything for us, right? And millennials need to fix everything that they did wrong. What have you heard about millennials at work? What stereotypes have you heard?
Entitled.
Lazy, entitled. What was that? They hate voicemail, yes, yes. I did today, I had to call a client, and she is the director of marketing at a retail store that shall remain nameless, and she's a millennial, and I called and her voicemail box was full. And I was like, this is a little bit difficult, because your voicemail box was full. But yeah, I mean, it's a stereotype, some of us don't have that. What else? Casual, afraid of the doorbell. Yeah, that's another thing. It's because of our parents. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things. Like, we're lazy, we're narcissistic, we cry when we get feedback, we're obsessed with our parents, we only eat avocado toast, we only live in cities. If you're a dude, you only have a beard and use beard oil, and everyone makes their own kombucha. Like, some of us do, yes, but not every single one of us. The list goes on and on and on. And the reality is that there aren't just stereotypes about millennials. Every single generation has gotten stereotypes when they went to work. Baby boomers, stereotypes were like, you're a bunch of hippies. It was the me generation, don't trust anyone over 30. Gen Xers, when they went to work. Gen Xers were here, do you remember what you were called? Slackers, yeah. Slackers, you're apathetic. You only listen to your breakdancing music and your grunge music, and you're gonna wear your flannel and go into work, and you're gonna be on your skateboards. Like, there were all these ridiculous stereotypes out there. The reality is that stereotypes are counterproductive, but there are some differences when we communicate across generations at work, and there's subtle differences. They're not really big things. Sometimes it can make us feel a little bit like these two in Modern Family. Oops.
Press shift.
I'm just going to start that from the beginning so you can hear everything.
I want to use all caps to express how angry I am. It takes forever to press shift before each letter.
Why don't you just put on the caps lock?
You can do that?
Oh, Jay, just double click here.
Didn't work.
Well, that's because you didn't double click. You just clicked twice.
How's it different?
Double click. See?
That's exactly what I did. Double click.
No, you're still just clicking twice. Listen, double click, not double click.
I'm not an idiot. Double click.
You get conflict, that's the same thing.
It's the exact same thing.
Double click.
Double click.
Oh, what the? It's the first time I've ever used the F word.
Okay, so the goal is to not feel like that. That is the goal. So I keep talking about generations. I do want to get a gauge of who is in here. So this is how we break down generations. And as I'm going through this, we obviously, you can bump yourself up or down a generation if you really feel like it. No one will know. I definitely won't know. But starting with traditionalists born before 1946. Are there any traditionalists in the room? Okay, I don't see any traditionalists. So they're only about 2% of the full-time workforce right now. What about baby boomers born between 46 and 64? Where are the boomers at? Cool, okay, you're kind of quiet. Usually boomers cheer for themselves. Yeah, they're like really happy to be boomers. They're like, woo, we're here, yeah, boomers. The Xers are like, yay, we're here. Gen Xers, where are you at? Born between 65 and 79? Nice. Awesome, okay, you guys did a really good job cheering. Gen Xers, okay, there's a lot of you here. If there's a lot of Xers, I always like to say that I feel like Xers don't believe a lot of what I say, especially until I talk about their generation. So if you are an Xer, I'm ready for that. I'm also like kind of scared sometimes, just because that's the case. Millennials, where are my fellow millennials? Born between 80 and 95? No cheers. Cool, great. Okay, there's so many of you in here. There was an opportunity. Yeah, millennials, also known as Generation Y. And a lot of us too right now, for some reason, many people think that millennials are just anyone under the age of 25. But the oldest is 37. We've been working for a long time. How about anyone after millennials? Gen Edge? Also Gen Z is another name for them? No one here? Okay, cool. So they're coming into the workforce very soon. You probably already have them as your interns. We just had interns this summer at BridgeWorks, and I managed one of them. I've never felt so old before. So there's a big change that's coming, and honestly, these people don't work like millennials. And I think that millennials, when you start managing this generation, you'll see how cool it is to be part of your own generation, right? There's like a different bond that you'll have. All right, anyone feel like they have 1 foot in one generation, 1 foot in another? You're kind of between two. Okay, so if you are that person, we call you a cusper. And there's a whole entire chapter in a BridgeWorks book that's called Cusper the Friendly Ghost. And it's titled that because cuspers usually feel invisible. They look at this topic of generations, they start hearing information, and they're like, yeah, your numbers say that I'm a Gen Xer, but I really feel more like a baby boomer, or vice versa. Cuspers are actually really important to this topic because they naturally see two viewpoints all the time. They might be the person on your team or in your department who's constantly translating between two people. They'd be like, oh, Jessica, what Steve was trying to say wasn't that, it was actually this, so don't take it wrong, it was meant in a really good way. They're that person. So if you are a cusper, we like to call you generationally bilingual, if you will. So add that to your LinkedIn if you really want to. No one will know what it means. Okay, so also, a lot of numbers. I feel like looking at this slide too, it's just like, wow, you're really putting people into boxes. I am. But the numbers are really just a starting place of understanding generations. What we really look at and explore when we're looking at trends, when we're doing our research, is much less about the number, and it's more around what you experienced growing up. So during your formative years, your teenage years, the time when you're figuring out the world around you, that's what has a lasting impact on the way that you think and behave later in life. Is it the only thing that affects that? Absolutely not. But what we find is that generations who have shared memories, they have some shared traits and behaviors. So an example of this is the institution of NASA. Okay, so for baby boomers who are here, if I say NASA to you, what is your first memory? Landing on the moon. Yeah, man landing on the moon. What did it feel like to see that happen?
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, why was it awesome?
Never been done.
Never been done. Yeah, it never been done. It was incredible. I talked to one boomer one time, he's like, we all gathered in my neighborhood and we went to the house on the street with the one person who had a color television. It was not in color, it was in black and white. But it was still incredible to see. Because it's like JFK said, we're going to put a man on the moon, and then that actually happened, and winning the space race. I mean, it was an incredible feeling. Okay, now I say NASA to all of these Gen Xers who are in here. If I say NASA to you, what is your first memory? Challenger explosion, yeah. Yeah, what did it feel like to see that happen? It's traumatic. It's terrible. Yeah, I mean the TV, for the most part, like the TV was rolled into the classroom. That meant it was supposed to be a good day. And there's a teacher on board. Because of course, who are you going to put on board of a space shuttle for every single person to watch but a teacher? I mean, we're at a university right now. Every single person in this room has been influenced by a teacher. And so I talked to a lot of Gen Xers and they're like, I was watching this and then the shuttle exploded. I've talked to some people who said, I didn't even know what was happening. Like, was that supposed to happen? Is that how every shuttle looks when it takes off? And I've talked to other people and they say it was scary. And all of the media coverage afterwards, it was not answering any question. It was raising more questions. So Xers have said things to me like, I didn't know what was happening, I was scared, but I did know that if I couldn't trust this amazing institution of NASA that my parents talked about all the time, I mean, who could I trust? So it was this beginning of skepticism for Gen Xers. So these things, these patterns are what we look at to understand how different generations work together. Now that being said, This is sociology, right? So I'm studying trends and patterns, and that means there are going to be moments today when you're like, wow, that does not identify me, that does not identify any single person I work with. And if you feel that way, that's fine. There might be other moments where you're hitting the person next to you and you're like, oh, I get you now, okay? So both things can happen. Feel free to feel both things. And I mean, the question kind of comes up to, it's like, why do we keep talking about generations? Why do we keep talking about millennials? And it's because there are big demographic shifts going on. Baby boomers, 10,000 turn 65 every single day. So that means some baby boomers are approaching retirement in the next 5-10 years. And there are other boomers who are saying, I'm not planning to retire. I'm planning for my next phase. I'm planning for my next big thing. The legacy that I continue to have on this community and in this industry. 1 in 4 boomers are planning to have an encore career. And when I was talking to people ahead of time, they were saying things like, you know, agencies and consulting, they're dealing with knowledge transfer issues. So that's one challenge. Another is Generation Xers, by the way, also known as the forgotten middle child generation. No one really talks about Xers. They're kind of forgotten. So there's a question of how are we developing that next generation of leaders who are taking over every single organization? What are we doing for them? How are we engaging them? Half of Gen Xers report right now feeling stalled in their careers, okay? And the millennials, we're huge. We are going to be half of the American workforce by 2020. We're going to be 75% of the global workforce by 2025. So just by numbers, we're giant compared to the other generations that work. Also, this poses other kinds of challenges. So the Center for State and Local Government Excellence releases a report every year. Found that 73% states and localities are hiring, which is up from 66% in the previous years. But essentially what this got to in the report is it just said that there is a sense of urgency about recruitment, retention, and succession planning. Okay, so taking all of that into consideration, I'm going to talk about each generation and talk about some specific ways that you can communicate across generations, and then also talk about different kind of communication clashes that can happen and what you can do about it. But before I get into that, I actually am going to take a time and stop talking because I want to hear you talk a little bit. So I want you to take just a minute and turn to the person next to you, and I want you to talk about what kind of communication challenges you have had at work. It doesn't have to be generational, just to kind of start thinking about it. So what communication challenges have you had at work? And then we'll share out a little bit. Take a couple of minutes. What you were talking about. Awesome.
So one thing that I've found, and I think this is my generation, the millennial generation, is very guilty of this, is the phenomenon of frequent communication replacing quality of communication. That things that could be solved in a 5-minute conversation, either in person or on the phone, end up taking 10 emails back and forth, each of which takes 5 minutes to write, or having a instant messaging service that's just open all day, and how much unnecessary stuff gets put into that, taking time away from other work.
That's a very good point. I've heard some people have a very strict 3 email rule, where if you cannot get across what you need to say in 3 emails, then you have to pick up the phone or go talk to someone in person, because of challenges that can arise from that. Yeah. All right. What else? What else was talked about? All right. Cool. I don't know if you were just volunteering at first.
And the lack of understanding from the older generation that both spouses are now working in the workforce.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit?
I had one employee who basically told me that, oh, you have a wife, she can do all the laundry and all that stuff, and not while you are at work and you can do all the work stuff and she do all that home stuff, and it's not understanding that it's equal now. It's not.
Yes. And so you're bringing up a really good point, because I mean, when we talk about the trend of work-life balance, it's because both parents, they need the balance because they're sharing so many more responsibilities, much unlike how it used to be. So yeah, it's a very good point. Thank you. All right, what else? Maybe hear from 1 or 2 more people. No pressure. Okay, cool. I'll go back here a little bit.
Thank you. So my biggest communication problem with my previous generation was about the trust on technology, because our generation is basically living in the technology world. We do everything with technology, but I mean the most part of my conversation right now is my mom or other clients we were facing to is convince them, yes, I can work. Don't need to worry and just use it. And then, I mean, but people still concerned about that, and they will easily freak out even if they just kick on the power strip and lose the power. So that is something I met. Yeah.
For sure. No, that's a really good point. Really good. It does echo like crazy back here. So I understand what you're saying. Okay. Just over here.
So one thing, I talked about Thomas and we didn't really, well, I'm an educator and the emphasis on writing, especially among younger people, is kind of changing in the style and formality of it.
Yeah, writing is changing a lot. Whenever I work with educational institutions too, they're like, they write really differently. And I mean, writing has continued to change over time, but it's like, what does that mean getting to the workplace? Because writing is important no matter what your position is, for sure. All right, have we heard from a baby boomer by chance? I wasn't asking people's generations as we're going through, but I want to make sure we hear from everyone. Over here, okay, great, thank you.
People not listening, not hearing others in the conversation, and that really doesn't help when you're trying to get multiple types of information.
Can you explain that a little bit more, please? You mean like in a meeting?
Sure, yeah, in a meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, so not listening. And another thing, I don't know if this is what you're relating to, but kind of speaking to technology as well, the idea of bringing a device to a meeting. So if you have your laptop up or if you have your phone sitting in front of you, and for me, I will say I do this all the time. I'm like, I can totally multitask. I can look here, I can talk, I am in this. But then if someone at certain points like, Hannah, what did you think about what was just said? I'm like, sorry, can you please repeat that? It was just a quick second that I was looking down. So sometimes there's a concern, it's like, are you actually listening to everything? Some people are probably much better at that kind of multitasking than myself in here, but it's a challenge too that we hear about just as it comes to communication and kind of coming back to efficiency. All right, cool. So this was great to kind of get the conversation going. We're going to touch on some of these things as I keep talking. But I want to go through all the generations now. We're going to start with baby boomers, understanding what shaped them, how that shapes the way that they work. So boomers who are in here, I'm just going to ask you really quickly just to shout out, if you will, some things that you remember growing up. And you can shout out things on the slide if you really want to, or you can go beyond it. What do you remember growing up?
John Kennedy's assassination.
John Kennedy's assassination. Yeah. What do you remember about that?
I remember just the shock of it happening.
The shock of it happening. Yeah. I've talked to many boomers. It's like everyone remembers where they were. Everyone remembers the look on the adults' faces around them. Some people tell me it's the first or the only time they saw their parents cry. It was a very, very monumental, big thing. Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that. Who else? Yes. Sorry, I'm going to come back. I should use the mic. And Tang. Oh my gosh. Every generation should just be grateful that we have Tang because of what happened. Yes, exactly. Thank you. What else? Gas for less than $1. Yes. What is that like? I don't know. Yeah. And waiting in line at the gas stations, right? I hear about that a lot. Yeah. Life without an interstate? Yeah. Transportation. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Riding in the back of a car with no seatbelts. Yes, there were. I mean, that just seems so dangerous. Like, I look at how baby boomers lived and the complete limit of rules and safety precautions. I'm like, good on you guys, because you survived. Yeah. Maybe just one more thing. Yes.
Well, they're kind of first. They're Beatles.
The Beatles, yes.
Oh, that's up there, I guess.
British invasion.
Race riots, of course.
Yes,
and
race
I just
riots.
wanted to add that we also had an explosion. Apollo 1 blew up on the pad and burned up 3 astronauts.
Yeah, thank you for
I
adding
just
that.
looked that up in 1967. So we had our disaster. And 13 almost went down.
There you go. Thank you for adding that. You also had your disaster. Yeah, definitely. I mean, in general, for baby boomers, I do just want to say too that this is a really big generation as well. They're called the baby boomers for a reason. Between 48 and 64, a baby was born every 8 seconds. So growing up, boomers felt the power of those numbers. And one thing that we look at is, especially growing up during the 1960s, this was a time of counterculture. This was a time for change. And part of the change was asking the youth demographic to be a part of what was going on in this country. Up until that point, it hadn't happened in the way that it was happening in the 60s. So leaders were looking to youth to say, hey, I know you're young, but you can change the world. Come with me and help me do that. So Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, Gloria Steinem, all of these leaders were calling on young people to change the world and to change the country. And I talked to a lot of boomers at this time, and they're like, you know, it was empowering in a way, but it was also very sad and it was very tragic. And just for me personally, when I look at what this generation went through during that time and seeing all those turbulent changes, they never stopped fighting. They rolled up their sleeves, they fought the good fight. So what tends to happen is boomers who are coming of age during that time, they're optimistic, they're idealistic, they believe in a vision and a mission and contributing to something bigger. I will say too though, sometimes I talk to boomers, they're like, yeah, I don't remember that stuff in the 60s because I was maybe 7 years old. What I remember is waiting in line at the gas station. I remember that the economy started to go down. There weren't enough books in school, there weren't enough desks, and you had to do everything in your power to get ahead. It was an incredibly competitive time. So when baby boomers went into the workforce, they brought that competitiveness with them. So they got to work, checked their personal life at the door, and walked in professionally, wearing the right things, saying the right things, knowing who to talk to, how to talk to them, how to read body language, how to read tone of voice. They changed the 40-hour work week into like the 50, 60, 70, 80, 100-hour work week. Thank you, boomers. But for the most part, baby boomers were doing that because they had to. If they did not work that hard and work all those hours, there are millions of people waiting in line who are just going to take their jobs for them. So when we think about the baby boomer generation today, they tend to be optimistic, idealistic, they're competitive, they have a very hard work ethic, and they are great relationship builders. So this is something that many times is attributed to traditionalists. Traditionalists were fantastic at building relationships at work. And baby boomers, when they went to work for traditionalists, they also had to learn how to build really strong relationships. Because they knew that to get ahead in life, personally, professionally, you had to know someone. You had to have some sort of close relationship with them. And I witnessed this recently with my mother. She's a baby boomer, and 4 days ago, I was training for a marathon. I'm training for a marathon right now, actually the Portland Marathon. I'll be here in a month. And I sprained my ankle and my foot, hurrah. And so what did I do? Called my mom, because what else do you do when you hurt yourself but call your mother when you're almost 30 years old? So I called my mom. I was like, hey, Ma, sprained my ankle, I think. What should I do? She's like, oh, okay, I'll take you to the urgent care, but on the way, let's call Dr. Alex. I was like, okay. Dr. Alex is our chiropractor, and I don't see him very often. I also think it's really weird to call him on a Saturday when he's not working, because I'm like, you can't do that. My mom's like, honey, no, this is the kind of relationship I have with him, it's fine. So she shoots him a text message. He quickly responds to her and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Give me a call in the car on the way there. And we get on the phone and then they start talking about families and all these other things. And then he starts asking me all these different medical questions and asking where my bruising is. And he gives me all this really helpful insight before I go into the doctor. And then at the end of the conversation, he's like, hey Hannah, just make sure you shoot me a text and let me know how you're doing afterwards, okay? I was like, yep, okay, cool. And I looked at my mom afterwards and was like, Ma, that just felt really inappropriate to me. And she's like, honey, I would not do that unless I had a really strong relationship with him. You need to start building relationships with the right people. I was like, but that seems like you're calculating it. She's like, that's not fair, okay? I just get to know people. And I was thinking about it and I was like, I do that too, but I don't do it the way my mom does. Because for her, it just comes naturally all the time. And this is something in general for us to know, that when we are communicating with boomers across the board, we're communicating with them at work, we need to be sure that we build relationships, and an easy way to do that is to not skimp on pleasantries. One thing I hear from baby boomers right now all the time is they're like, it just seems like people come into the office and then they just sit down and they start working. And I'm like, hello. How are you? You had a weekend, how was it? Let's just spend 10 minutes talking about it and then we can dive into work. I don't need to chat with you all day long. But I hear from baby boomers and from millennials, they're like, I don't know, I mean, sometimes I'm not sure about certain people coming in the office. For boomers especially, just be sure you take time to carve that out. Relationships are critical, they're still important. And baby boomers have a lot of knowledge and they want to pass it on, but that's on us to build a relationship and then ask questions to learn from them. Okay. Do you have a question? Yeah.
I'm not a boomer, but your
my shoe's untied.
So
all right, time out, everyone. I'm gonna tie my shoe, and then I'll be back. One sec. I appreciate you looking out. Safety.
I want you to finish your marathon there.
I do too. So thank you. Appreciate that.
You should say Millennials believe in
I am the safety.
Got it. All right, cool, thank you. Okay, so this next piece I want to talk about is kind of a change that we're seeing. We like to call the new rules of the game. And it's just that the rules of work have shifted. If you think about just in your own organization, think about the transportation industry and how much that has changed in the past 10 years, in the past 20 years, in the past 30 years. How you get work done, how has that changed? And one of the things that we see is just the communication and the way you get a message across. That's one of the biggest fundamental shifts. So at work, one thing that we look at is in the past, okay, to get ahead, to make sure your idea was heard. You're working in an environment with traditionalist bosses. If the boss said jump, what would you say? How high, right? Yes, how high, okay? If you say jump to a millennial, what are we gonna say? Why? Why would we jump? Jumping sounds a little stupid. There's a different way we can do this. There's this pushback and this challenge in asking why. Now, a lot of times it's just kind of understanding where does that specifically come from. And the biggest biggest reason that that happens and why younger people question and push back and ask why is because baby boomers, for the majority of parents for millennials, they grew up in what kind of resembled a dictatorship. So like what mom and dad said, that is what you did. And you did not push back and you did not ask questions, you just did as you were told. So when they became parents, they're like, I do not want to raise my children that way. Nope. I want to raise them in a democracy where they feel like they have a voice, where they feel like they can be heard. So a couple examples of how this happened. Planning vacations. The #1 age segment going through vacation planning sites when millennials were growing up were teenagers. Because mom and dad were like, okay, where do we want to go? We think we want to go to California. We're not really sure where. Why don't you kids go research it, come up with a few places, and then we'll make a decision together as a family. Okay, other generations. Did you have any say over where you went or what you did if you were so lucky to go on vacation? No, it was like, get in the back seat, eat your peanut butter sandwich, be quiet, we'll get there when we get there, okay? Like, it was a very different kind of arrangement. Another example of this is even punishment. Breaking curfew. Okay. I never did this growing up, and it didn't happen very often. I was really a goody two-shoes. I rarely broke any rules. But when I did, and I snuck home at 12:15 instead of 12, I would kind of sneak in, and I was like, my parents are sleeping. Whew, got away with this, it's fine. But they were waiting for me at the kitchen table. They're like drinking tea. I'm like, Hannah, you broke your curfew. Sit down. It's like, okay. Sat down, they said, so, pretty disappointed. You weren't here on time. How do you think you should be punished? That was the biggest punishment in the entire world for me, to have to think about how I should be punished. But then it turned into this conversation. Other generations, do you ever have any say over how you were punished? No, for the most part that was not the case. Now, all millennials are not like me, I get that. But the reality is that the conversation shifted, where all of a sudden we were kind of on an even level playing field with our parents, with adults, with parents, with teachers, and even in some cases, bosses. And FedEx kind of makes fun of that in this commercial.
Hey, who's this?
Oh, that's Kyle. He aced his 5th grade geography class.
Huh.
You see, now that we're using FedEx to ship globally, I have to learn all the countries again, so I brought in Kyle as a consultant. Did you know that we have customers in Czechoslovakia?
Actually, it's called the Czech Republic.
Yes, Kyle. You are a lifesaver. Yeah, without Kyle, I never would have heard of that new country called Buttheadistan.
We understand you want to grow internationally. FedEx serves over 220 countries and territories.
Okay, it's an exaggeration. But really what I'm trying to show you, if you're more of a visual person, in the past, work really looked like this. You've all seen this, right? It's an org chart. Many places in here are probably structured like this on paper. In this model, who has the power?
John Smith.
John Smith, right, the CEO, good old John. Right, where are all the big decisions made? Made with John. Do people on the bottom hear about all those decisions? Maybe not, okay? Millennials and some Gen Xers, and definitely the next generation, grew up in a world that looks a little bit more like this. This network kind of model. Where's the power in this one?
It's distributed.
It's distributed, right. Absolutely. You make a big decision, it's probably made at different levels, so everyone kind of knows what's going on. All right, so there are positives and negatives to both of these models. What's good about the org chart? Clear distinction, you know who's in charge, yeah, what else? That's it, that's all that's good. There's 2 things.
If there's an emergency, that's good.
If there's a sense of urgency, that can be faster.
Emergency.
Emergency, yeah, because it's really clear. There's a process. Faster to get to a decision, okay? There is a decision maker. It's really clear who the decision maker is.
It's final.
You know where you fit in. What?
It's final, like a decision is made.
Yes, it's fine. I thought you said it's fun. And I was like, interesting. Never had anyone see that one for this one before, but to each their own. Okay, so yeah, but there's a final decision. All right? What about the blue one? What's good about that one? Nothing. There's nothing good about that one, yeah. Yeah, all ideas are good ideas, worth discussing. Okay, what else? Gives ownership. What else? More open and transparent. There's empowerment. Yeah, people feel more empowered to make decisions. Okay, so just out of curiosity in this room, how many of you would rather work in something like an org chart? Okay, cool. There's a few of you. It's across generations too, that's good. All right, how many of you would rather work in the blue one? Okay, a few more. How many would rather work in a combination of both? Yeah, trick question. Okay, but here's another question. How many of you feel like your work environment right now is more like an org chart? Okay, how many of you feel like it's more like a network? Okay, so a couple challenges that come from these two different models. On the left, all the positive things that were said, when we do focus groups with people, across generations, but specifically with younger people, some of the more things that we hear are, that just looks like a bunch of bureaucracy. It looks like there's a lot of hoops to jump through. That looks like it's going to take me 10 years to move one level in this organization. It looks like I won't be able to change my mind if I want to. It looks like I won't really feel super empowered. There are other people who look at it and they're like, that's exactly what I want to work in because everyone's different, but by and large, it's what we hear. On the flip side, for the blue one, we hear things like, that looks chaotic. That looks like nothing will ever get done. That looks like Silicon Valley. We don't work in Silicon Valley if we have government jobs, right? Like there's certain kinds of restrictions because the reality is that you have to find a blend of both. Most of you probably get work done that looks a lot more like this. And this is the way that the world is changing and shifting. One thing that does get lost, if we stick to more of that white org chart model, is we lose hearing people at every level. And when we look at the number one reason that younger people stay in organizations, it's because they feel like they're valued. How do they feel valued? If they feel like they're heard. And so this is just a message to leaders to give the next generation opportunities to share their opinions, to push back, to share their ideas. Many of them are coming out of school and they're like, I just learned all these really cool things at school and now I want to go change my community with all these things that I learned. But they get into an environment and it's like, oh no, you can't do that. And you have to wait a long time. And you also have to prove yourself before we're going to listen to your ideas. And that's reasonable. That is understandable. There is a time and a place to position your ideas, but younger people, they just need to know that people are listening. And they don't expect that you're going to do everything that they share. They're like, I don't expect you to run with all of my ideas. I'm just shouting out 10 ideas. One of them might be good. I just want you to listen. And to that point, I will say, hold them accountable. If they have an idea and they really want to run with it, say, cool, all right, I'm going to give you 10% of your work week right now to do this. Give me a plan of how you're going to get it done, and then we'll evaluate it at the end. If it didn't work, we'll coach you through how to fix it in the future. Because some people are looking at this. You could have an engineer who's looking at a plan, and they're like, I have tried to change this 5 times already. I love that you have ideas, but we've had this idea before, and it hasn't worked. And they can just say, but you know what, maybe you have something you're gonna do that's different. Okay. Also, the other thing that I do wanna point out is, especially with baby boomers, I feel like whenever I talk to them, they say, you know, it's like I got a strand of gray hair and people stopped listening to me and they stopped asking questions. And when we look at other generations and we want to say, hey, do you wanna engage and communicate across generations? Something to do with boomers is to think about how are you stepping up engagement? Because we spend so much time talking about other generations, but the boomers I talk to are like, I want to share information and pass on my legacy and ideate and brainstorm, but no one comes and talks to me anymore. And I got this quote from someone that we spoke with, and she said, we care about our legacy, we care about transferring institutional knowledge via mentoring. We're dying to pass that on, so the younger generations just need to come talk to us. So this is what boomers are saying in this room. And it's on us to go out of our way to ask questions and say something. Because boomers aren't necessarily gonna come and give you a call and say, hello, I have 10 free minutes. I'm going to share with you all of my ideas and what I have learned in the past 20 years. You have to go out of your way and ask those questions yourself. All right, so that's boomers. I'm gonna move along to Gen Xers. Xers in the room. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna ask Xers, just shout out like a few things that you would add to this list. What do you remember growing up?
Just say no.
Just say no, yes. It's a big email. First email, yes, first email. Schoolhouse Rock, yes. Big stakes. I was like, what does that mean? I was like, maybe I don't know this reference. Mixtapes, thank you. I have those a lot. I don't know some people's references. I'm like, I don't know that. Yeah, what else? The internet. Yes, the internet. Gen Xers are the ones, for the most case, who brought in the internet and email addresses to the workplace. I feel like younger generations, we don't realize that happened a really long time before we got to work. We have to thank an Xer. But yeah, I mean, Gen Xers, there's a lot of different stuff going on when you were growing up. I will say that Xers were told when they were young, hey kids, you're not going to do as well as your parents. So Xers are like, sweet, cool, cannot wait to grow up. But a big part of that is because there are just big shifts and changes for Gen Xers during their formative years. To give an idea of how this changed, the explosion of media, that's a huge one. Talk about mixtapes, which apparently it was really annoying if the DJ started talking over the beginning of the song. It was like, why are you ruining this for me? That was a really big thing I hear. But in general, it was like listening to all this music on the radio, but also watching it with MTV and music videos, of which I know there were only about 7 or 8 at first, and they would play on loop, and you would wait for them to come back to watch them. Xers watched MTV, after school specials, Saturday morning cartoons, cable news came out, they were watching so much television. That television also included 24-hour news. CNN, Ted Turner. When that came out, anyone in here remembers when news went from 15 minutes to 30 minutes? That was such a big deal. It was like, how could you possibly fit news into 30 minutes? It's a very long time. Then we went to 24 hours, and reporters found every single story to fill 24 hours of time. So Xers, when they were young, were hearing all these stories, Enron, WorldCom, they were watching political scandals, because they're old enough to remember one president saying, I am not a crook, and young enough to remember another president saying other things, neither of which were true. They also, they were watching advertisements for things like the Thigh Master and the Ab Roller, which had to be recalled because it was severely hurting people's backs. And then they were watching Milli Vanilli, like they learned about Milli Vanilli, you can't even trust who's singing anymore. So Xers just repeatedly heard all this messaging, they're like, wow, okay, I can't trust politicians, I can't trust musicians, I can't trust leaders of organizations or companies, but you know who I can trust? Me. I can trust myself. So Xers learned early on to push back, to ask questions, to poke holes. Other generations were like, why are you so defensive? Why will you not get on board with this idea? And Xers say, look, I'm asking questions because I care. If I didn't care, I wouldn't ask the questions. So in general, as a whole, when we look at this generation, they're independent, resourceful, entrepreneurial, and skeptical. If you want to communicate with Gen Xers, a group that is that skeptical, you need to be honest and direct and to the point. Don't say area of opportunity if you can say weakness. Okay, like little things like that. And I will say this is true of giving feedback, this is true of regular communication. And also, I just want to show you an example of where this can go a little awry when you're communicating with a millennial. I manage 2 Gen Xers, and we are not strangers to generational differences at work. This one was with Phil. Phil's a speaker for the company. His alias is the motivator. He's like the guy that you go talk to when you're at a transition in life and you want to feel really good about whatever decision you're making next. You talk to Phil because he's awesome. I was going to see him present, and I sent him this text. It was early in the morning. It said, yo, stupidly got up for 6 a.m. breakfast, restaurant's closed, thinking of heading out now to find a Starbucks and just meeting you at the Hilton. Is that cool? Want us to get you anything? I was there with my colleague, Skylar, okay? He sends this in response. That's cool. No need to pick me up anything. I think we'll have stuff at the meeting. Thanks. Period. So I saw that period, the end of thanks, and I was like, oh no. He is mad. He is annoyed. What have I done? I've done something wrong. I don't understand. Because in my peer circle, if you ever put a period at the end of thanks, it means you're going to have a big conversation later because someone's upset. Okay, so in response, I said, alrighty, well, let me know if you change your mind. Excited to see you present today. Kill it. I may have overcompensated a little bit in response. Okay, so I went to go talk to him. I went to the ballroom, saw Phil, and he came up to me and he hugged me. He's like, Hannah, hey, how's it going? So glad you're here. It's like, whoa, time out. No, that is not what you sounded like in your text message, dude. You sounded so mad. He's like, oh man, Hannah, no, that is just the way I talk. That's called grammar, okay? And so we laughed about it and I was like, all right, cool, from now on, I will know not to read into any of your messages because you're always gonna sound kind of like you're mad or annoyed or like a jerk, and he does. He hasn't changed anything about it, but it also just kind of taught him a little bit about how I typically communicate. So now, the running joke, cool period, thanks period, emoji, 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 emoji. So it's always crystal clear. Okay. All right, so I want to just touch on a communication challenge that we see, talking about the succession plan, and really this is about transitioning. We're transitioning at work. And something that I tend to hear from people, it's like, okay, transition's happening, cool. And we're having conversations, talking about projects and passing on information, and I feel like I never hear from any of the extras I talk to. Like, they never ask me questions, they never check in, and I'm over here like, hi, hello, okay, how you doing? Are you fine? Are you not? I don't know, you never talk to me. And really what this is coming from, the root cause of this kind of feeling of difference is kind of based on how we collaborate. So baby boomers, when they went to work, they learned how to collaborate like pros. It's like you go in, you have a meeting, you have an agenda. It's a good thing when different minds come together. You come up with something great, you delegate tasks, you have a clear timeline, and you leave. Fantastic. And then they passed on this collaborative spirit to millennials. We're really stereotyped as a generation that likes whiteboard walls, where we like to just go into a room and throw ideas on a wall. It's not every millennial, but we did grow up with a saying, 2 heads are better than 1. 3 heads are better than 2. There is no I in team. I know there's an I in win, but there is no I in team. And we were looking at posters in the classroom that were like this. We remember these, right? Teamwork, collaborate. There's trees in a field means collaboration. Didn't make sense. But we did learn there's a power in the group. There's a power in the collective. Groupthink is bad, but brainstorming and ideating is good. Now, Gen Xers, when they were growing up, they were told, if you want something done right, do it yourself. They grew up with working parents. The divorce rate more than doubled when they were growing up, so maybe their parents were divorced. They would go home after school and be by themselves, on their own. They were looking at posters in school like this. Hang in there. I'll be honest, I'm gonna be really honest, I don't get this. I don't understand it. I had someone explain it to me once. They're like, no, it's just like things could go wrong, but if you hang in there, it'll get better. And if you fall, you'll land on your feet. I'm like, no. But for Gen Xers, this is just true. At work, what this means is they like to go away. They're like, just tell me what you want when you want it. I'm gonna go over here, you stay over there, and I can get my work done. So if you want to motivate this generation, if you want to retain this generation, you have to give them freedom. Let them work independently. Let them work in a results-oriented environment, and the hours that work for them, and the place that works for them, and just measure them by results. Leave them alone. And a way to think about this is in benefits and perks. Kayak.com is a pretty strong Gen X workforce, and their benefits and perks, it says flexible hours, day off on your birthday, and no stupid meetings. Most extras are the ones who are like, why are we in a meeting about another meeting? This is a waste of time. Another example of this, I pulled this from the Washington State Department of Transportation, and they said, we offer you more than just a paycheck. And they make it very clear. It's like, we understand your life revolves around more than just your career, and your priority is making sure that you and your family will maintain health and financial security. They're like, we understand your priority might not be work. Work is important, but it's not priority. So this just speaks to a lot of Gen X truth. Here's the thing. I talked about those other reactions to this kind of independent work. Boomers could be thinking things like, seriously, why are you so cynical? Seriously, do you not want to just talk? Do you not want to get to know someone? Do you not want to come together and ideate ever? I have really good ideas. I want to share my knowledge. Millennials are like, why do you hate me? Why are you not sharing information with me? This is one of the biggest challenges with millennials managing up. Because millennials will set Xers off on a project, and there's kind of this expectation. It's like, you're gonna check in every so often, and I'll kind of see where you're at so I can tell my boss how you're doing. And then if you have questions, we'll kind of work together to move to the next step. But then you talk to millennials, and they're like, this Xer was 80% through the project, and I had to sit down with him, and I had to say, hey, how are you? You need to come talk to me. And the Xer would be like, look, I was just excited to show you this at the end. You need to tell me what you expect. So it's really important that you have to set and reset how many check-ins you expect. Okay, so I feel like at the end of talking about Xers, I make them sound terrible. I'm like, you're really skeptical. You're super direct and honest, and you only like working alone. I think Xers are great, and they do like to let their hair down every once in a while, which this commercial will show you.
Is that me? Was I singing?
Not paying for scheduled maintenance feels pretty good.
Okay, so I'm going to take about the next 5 minutes to talk about millennials, and then I will send you on a break, or I will be in here to answer questions, just to give you kind of the outline of the next 5 minutes. All right, so millennials. A lot of things shape millennials growing up. One of the biggest things we look at is technology, because technology always comes up for the millennial generation. And it's not just technology. Every single generation had new technology coming out. For millennials, it's the rate at which technology was coming out. So early millennials probably remember this beauty, Macintosh 128K. Total storage, 128 kilobytes. Okay, I've been told it's like 2 tweets on Twitter today. I've been told that. The early millennials, they graduated from college. That computer had turned into the first generation iPhone that could download ringtones 10 times the size of the storage of the Macintosh computer. Okay, that's massive change in a really short amount of time. When millennials are labeled as impatient or constantly wanting to change things, of course they are, because that's the normal that we had growing up, is change always happens. If it's not happening around us, we think, oh, I must be doing something wrong, I should create change. Okay? Also, another big thing that happened, and especially on a day like today, when we're all remembering it, seeing 9/11. That was powerful for every person in this room, every person in this country, every person in the world. For millennials, this is that moment of I remember where I was when. And I talk to some millennials and they say things like, it just renewed this sense of patriotism, didn't know what was going on, didn't know what terrorism was, I'd never learned of that before, didn't really know what a draft was until this happened. There's so many things that came out from it. When we look at trends of how this created change over time, one thing we look at is we look at this, we look at the rise in school shootings that were happening during millennials' formative years, and there is increased exposure to people to talk to us about what was going on. There was an actual influx in public spending for guidance counselors when we were growing up. So it was the guidance counselor coming to a room like this saying, hey everyone, safe space. How do you feel? Let's talk about our feelings. And I'll be honest, when I was younger, I was like, this seems a little cheesy. Like I'm writing a compliment and attaching it to a cotton ball, and that was a warm fuzzy. And like that at the time felt weird, but what it did is it gave us this safe environment to share how we felt, to talk to people in positions of authority about things that you would never talk about before. So we grew accustomed to having those very strong relationships with adults. So I do also want to point out that early millennials are different than late millennials. Early millennials, remember this lovely dial-up screen. Okay, technology enabled us to think and work differently, versus late millennials who had Wi-Fi in high school, smartphones in high school. If you were in high school before 2007 and you got a smartphone, it completely changed the way your brain developed. Okay, especially for next generation. Another change that we look at between early and late millennials, dream the dream. You can do anything you put your mind to. If you're gonna work as long and hard as I did, you better do something that matters. Early millennials, graduate pre-recession. They can maybe find an internship that's paid. Late millennials, they're like, wow, dreaming's super expensive. I kind of can't dream the dream. I can't get a job at anything related to my degree. I'll work as a barista for 5 more years, or I'll just go get my master's degree because no one will give me a job. So there's this shift. Late millennials tend to be a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more financially realistic, or just very conscious of finances in their life. All right, so altogether, millennials are collaborative, tech savvy, diverse, and socially accepting. Communication with millennials, keep it informal. Work lives and personal lives are pretty blurred. So for a baby boomer, they might write an email like this. Good morning, there's bullets, it's bolded, it's beautiful. Gen Xers, same exact email. Let's touch base on this later this week. Bullets, okay? Millennial, same email. Hey Joe, hope you're having a great day, super excited to touch base later this week, killer ideas. Got out of the office by 4:30, that's cool, emoji, 100. Thanks, exclamation point. So this is an exaggeration, but if you're a millennial, you know that you've questioned how many exclamation points you should put into an email. So it's just this trend that in general, millennials are like, I just want to know who you are as a person, and that's how I'll communicate with you. So it's really about bracing informalities and being as authentic as possible. Okay, so I want to leave you with that communication tip, and I also want to send some of you off on a break. So for the rest of you, if you want to stay in here, if you have any specific questions, I can answer lots of questions. I can give you info about the next generation after millennials, which many of you are Xers, so some of your kids probably fall into this generation. But with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me, to talk to each other, to talk about generations. I really, really appreciate it. And at the end of the day, we really are more similar than we are different, so we can focus on the similarities too, and not just the differences. All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Hannah. So for those of you who want to stay,